All right, Kayla, I think we'll just go ahead and get started now that it's 8 o'clock. If you could please take the roll.
Trustee Kane,
I'm here.
trustee Alexander,
Good morning.
trustee Landry, trustee Moore,
Good morning.
trustee Riley,
Good morning.
and I believe that's all we have.
I know we will not have trustees Kate's or Loring this morning. They had other things come up. But I've been in touch with both of them. Good morning. It's been a minute. So this is our regularly scheduled meeting here in January. Our last regularly scheduled meeting was in October. We had at one point planned to meet in December. It was a very hard meeting to try to get people to be at who needed to be at. So we are going to condense and combine things today. We are going to cover several things in the public session of this meeting and then move into executive session where we can talk about some of the more campus specific work with strategic planning. And I want to just in advance in the meeting thank particularly Jeff and Carolyn for their work in helping us navigate the materials today and get them all together. And Kayla as well, thank you for the adjustments that you were able to make in the last week. To get us started, we're going to just start with a final look at the committee assignments. This I don't think will take very long. This committee has seen them. The executive committee has seen them. The only change to the document that you have is that we're going to make sure the research work led by Vice Chancellor and President Joan Farini-Mundy will stay with the full board so that it's not sort of triple. So it has one place. It will be with the full board, but otherwise there's no change to that document. Are there any questions about the committee assignments that we have been through? This will be our final look at them before they move fully to the committees. Yes, Barbara. Trustee Alexander.
I just wanted to get confirmation that the executive committee has approved this version of it.
Yes. They went through it and we had a chance to talk it through with the various chairs and additionally the vice chancellors who are responsible for working with the various chairs are aware of the pieces in the work plan. That's a great clarification to say out loud, but yeah, they have. Great. And so I think what we'll see is in the comment, I mean, this is a 5-year plan, right? So it's not all going to be at everybody's next meeting, but we'll start to see more and more of this go through, as well as just that sort of constant reference to how things relate to the strategic plan. So thank you very much on that. Next section of our agenda is the update on the implementation timeline. And I'm going to turn this over to Vice Chancellors Dorsey and St. John.
Thank you, Trustee Kane. I'll get us started for this one. We are, as I think that the trustees are aware, but this has taken a much more structured form recently in a good way. We're collecting monthly updates now from the vice chancellors for action, movement on goals in their areas, as Trustee Kane just outlined, with the assignments having been parceled out across the plan to the 4 vice chancellors' portfolios. We now have a regular mechanism in place for collecting updates for goals that are not yet underway, goals that are in progress, goals that are completed. And we're moving those with help from Kim Jenkins into our internal tracker. So we have a continuously and regularly updated mechanism for understanding where we are across all facets of the plan, across all 5 commitments within the body of the plan. The work that comes next, well, I'll use myself as an example, but it's true for all the vice chancellors, is trying to figure out, are there goals that we need to start later in the spring? Are there goals we need to start later in the year? Are there goals that are no longer for reasons of changing priorities or resources or changing elements of our daily operations that no longer fit with the originally assigned dates that were given to them? Of course, if we are thinking of moving a goal to a different timeline, we would bring that through this committee. we'd bring it through the board leadership in consultation, of course, with the chancellor, the vice chancellors, and the presidents. But on the whole, I think it's safe to say, and again, I'll use myself as an example, there's a continuous assessment of all the goals in the plan that relate to academic and student affairs, and in consultation with all of the above named parties, and of course, the provost, Trustee McMahon, in his ASA role, Trustee Kane and others, taking stock on a regular basis and then reporting out on where we are. Again, I'll speak only for myself. My one desire is not to try to get all the balls in the air at the same time and watch them all drop, but rather to move forward a manageable number of goals that are connected in thematically or in outcome or in resource allocation or however they're connected, and move them forward in a way that works well. Particularly those goals, in my instance, that involve partnership with the provosts, who, as you all know, have very full workloads of their own. Timing those things that require their help will be very important. So that's just an example of how we're handling adjustments to the timeline. Our primary objective is to communicate openly, clearly, and proactively with all of you about any adjustments to the timeline, in addition to reporting out on things that are underway as planned moving forward and then completed. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I would also, of course, invite Vice Chancellor Dorsey to share her thoughts on this one.
Carolyn, Vice Chancellor Dorsey, do you have anything to add to what Jeff shared?
No, that was good.
Right. Any questions? But yes, Trustee Alexander.
I didn't understand that. I mean, it would be helpful to have a policy or an internal document or a memo or something that would explain the current status on the timelines and the identification of those that are under review for potential change, and some sort of recommendation about where and when such changes are scheduled to be presented to whoever. I just didn't feel like I understood that I knew what the internal process was for handling adjustments. And I appreciate the high-level presentation, but I'm looking for a bit more specificity, if I could.
No, thank you, Trustee Alexander. We will find a way to document any known or projected changes in as efficient a form as possible, so you all have that information, but in a way also that we do our best not to add yet another layer of administration to this work. So we'll do it in a way that meets the need, and we'll do it in a way that's as straightforward as we can. Thank you for that.
And if I could just elaborate.
Yeah, please go ahead.
It would be helpful if there was a document that described the systems process for identification, consultation, and presentation of changes. In other words, I'm not looking for what's the next change. I'm looking for the internal process by which I can be assured that this is being monitored, who's in charge of deciding when a change might be appropriate, and how it's going to flow through the system office before it hits the committee. I'm looking for that kind of an understanding of how this might be presented to either committees or executive committee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Alexander. Trustee Riley.
So maybe I haven't had enough coffee, but now I'm confused. I wonder how much, Barbara, we need to know. I don't think process, how things are determined is probably, it doesn't seem to be a board role as much as what the proposal is. So I'm a little confused about, I don't want to get in the weeds and get it seems to me how the staff does their work is not of interest to us. It's what the work is and what proposals they bring to us. So I'm confused about
I will say, Trustee Riley, and Trustee Alexander, I would never speak for you. I will say what I heard, let me reflect back what I heard, because what I heard is you want to understand how the decisions are being made so that you don't want to get in the weeds on all of it. You just want to understand who's involved in that decision-making process so that when we get stuff, you'll know from whence it came. That was the way I heard it, but you can speak for yourself.
I actually, that was a good description, Chair Kate, or yes, Chair Kate.
You can just call me on it. It's okay.
I'm not, I agree with Chair Riley. I mean, and normally the internal process is one that I do not care to micromanage by any means. I'm not talking about approving your process. But when I see a proposal come forward, it would be helpful for me to understand, oh, this is the process that I understood would be followed as to the development of the necessary justification and the type of review that occurred and why I'm seeing this at this point. Just some background information. So you described orally the fact that you're undergoing to do a process. And I just didn't hear that you had set one out yet. And if you have, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Vice Chancellor St. John, are you good? Are you clear?
I'm clear. Thank you. And that was useful elaboration. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to reflect on the fact that when we wrote the plan, we didn't do 5 years worth of timeline, which is one of the reasons that we're doing this process now, and that Vice Chancellor St. John and Vice Chancellor Dorsey and all the vice chancellors and everybody's they're intentionally building it as as we go from a timeline perspective. So it'll be important to get that process piece so that as we flesh out the timeline over the next several years and it evolves and as this living, breathing document helps guide our work. Yeah, Trustee Landry.
Morning, Chair Kane, nice to see you. Following up on Barbara's process question, this may not be a question to be answered now, and I don't expect that it would, but just something to think about in terms of the Strategic Planning Committee's process itself and what value this is to all of you. I'm very conscious of the fact that there's probably at least 15 of the most senior leadership on this meeting this morning, which is a huge commitment of time and resources to this meeting. And I know that you're working on many other pieces of this. So whether it's now or at some other point, there's a couple of things that I'm interested in being sure about. One, that this is worth it for you, right? That you get something out of this, that it matters. And if it isn't worth it to you, what would make it worth it to you to be in this kind of forum with all of us? And two, going back to Jeff's comment about full workload at the provost, I know that all of you have full workloads as well. So just staying in touch with that aspect of things as a strategic planning, our role is mostly process, I think, on the Strategic Planning Committee as opposed to substantive. So making sure that this hasn't become an overload in some way and that you're feeling that we're adding things. I'm assuming based on what I've heard thus far that this has worked its way all the way up and everybody's in full agreement with all of this and we're just sort of sanctioning it. But I just want to stay in touch with that. I do know that strategic plans can become big weights and more like a task as opposed to something that's really relevant. And I know Jeff's been working very hard to make sure that that isn't the case. But in case it becomes that, I just want to leave that door open. We have all of the presidents on our call. And so to the extent you say, this is fantastic, this really works for us, these meetings are so valuable to us, it's wonderful, that's great. If there's something we should change, please let us know during these meetings, that's fine, or any other adjustments. So I just wanted to reference the larger process.
Landry, I will just say I agree with you. And actually, it's great to see so many of the presidents whom we love. They are not formally on the agenda today. And so just from a clear, they're choosing to be here. So it's a good question, right? Because I think we did not structure the agenda to include presentations from any of the presidents today. It is wonderful to see them all as they are welcome at all committees. And I think I'm not going to speak for the presidents, but in the years I've been on the board, many presidents choose to attend many committee meetings, whether they're on and I think it's probably so they don't miss things. But I think we are a committee that is overseeing the implementation of a strategic plan. And but it's wonderful to have the presidents, and I certainly welcome the feedback as well, but they were not explicitly on the agenda today to sort
Yeah,
of
that really wasn't, this is really a more future oriented piece
Okay.
that sometimes
and
these
that's
things
a
get a lot,
conversation we
these
can
things
have.
can get a life of their own. And as we launch and proceed, that at any point, if all of you, this is your plan, right? I mean, all of our plan, but if at any point the process isn't really meeting your needs or serving your purpose, I think we want to hear that too. So it might meet all of your needs, and that's fabulous. And yeah, it's not, I had no sense that all of you were mandated to be here this morning and didn't want to be. I just, since you're all here, I just wanted to make that open invitation to keep us posted on how it works for you. That's all.
Thank you very much, Trustee Landry. That's great feedback. Anything else related to the item on changing the timeline, the adjustments? We'll get a process piece back from Vice Chancellor St. John, so we understand that. We will continue to revisit this at meetings, as we do have timeline details that come into view from the process. So this will be an ongoing conversation. Again, because the initial plan didn't include 5 years of dates. Great. Let's move now to the strategic planning communications update. This one I'm gonna turn it over to Vice Chancellor Dorsey and St. John, but I will also be a part of this presentation.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Go for it. Yeah, Carolyn, go ahead.
Again, this is just a very quick update. In prior full board meetings, we've offered you information about our plans for internal communication and how we've been working on making sure that all of the internal stakeholders have been receiving updates and been part of this process all the way through, and we plan to continue that. But upon the good advice of the Chancellor and in talking with the Chancellor, we were trying to determine the frequency and how often to communicate. And it was really talking about not so much how often or when, but about this when we have something really substantive that we need to get out and information. So instead of saying it's going to be a weekly or a monthly update, it's when we have information to get out to folks and what's the best way to do that. So that's really what we've been working with more on the internal side and as well as external. But with the external piece, what we've tried to do across the board with anything that that we have been putting out, whether it's been press related or information that's gone out about our programming, we've tried to somehow link everything that we're doing to some particular piece of the strategic plan. And it's been really great. We've had a couple of different pieces that have been in the news lately around UMA and the piece of land that was sold and the housing unit that will be going up. And in those interviews, the Chancellor and others have been able to talk about the fact that, you know, this is all relating to part of what we're looking at doing in our strategic plan. So it's a good way to be able to get that information out to people and get them more familiar with what our priorities are. So that's really what we're hoping to do as we continue to get some of the specifics out about the priorities across the system and what it is that we're looking to do. In addition to that, yesterday, Vice Chancellor St. John and Vice Chancellor Lowe and I met with Hanover, folks that do some research for us. And as part of one of the other pieces of research that they're doing, they're also going to look at ways that some of our peers, the way that they publicly put some information out on their websites about their plans and their goals and the way that they are communicating some of their wins and successes. So we're excited to get to hear back from them in a few weeks about ways that we might be able to communicate based on things that they're seeing with our peer institutions. So some things that we're looking to incorporate as we move forward. But again, just moving ahead.
That's great. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Vice Chancellor St. John, are there any other things you wanted to add to that?
It's a perfect summary.
And I would just say, I think this is an example of where we are trying to make the strategic plan not the add-on, right, but integrated into what we're doing. And so we know we have, and the board, the full board has made communicating the successes of the system, the work of the system, the campus is a top priority that's been consistent throughout the time, particularly this Chancellor has been here. And where we can link it to This is deliberate, right? This is not a random decision to look at a particular building or take an action. It actually is part of a specific forward motion of the board and of the system leadership overall. So we're going to try to highlight those kinds of examples in these meetings and with the fuller board around, again, so where we can take the process that is the purview of this committee, but show how it is having an impact. Are there questions about the communications piece? Excellent. Well, thank you very much. The next is going to be a topic that we are, I think, is important related to KPIs. And again, this is because of where we are in the process, building out all of these pieces and the work on all of the campuses. These are in development. And Jeff, I think you're taking the lead on this section.
Thank you. So mindful of good feedback from Chair Riley, Trustee Kane, several other trustees in the fall, we began thinking about how we would develop key performance indicators for the overall plan. So we've taken a couple of steps so far. The institutional research group here in the system office that reports to me is drafting a set of 6 to 8 KPIs that would address in a top-line way, comprehensively, the entire plan. That's done mindful of the board's call not to overcomplicate how we assess the plan, how we benchmark the plan. We know we have myriad goals across a number of thematic areas in the plan. We want to keep the actual KPIs as simple but representative of the full plan as we can. So 6 to 8 is the number we're working on as our starting point. In addition to drafting the KPIs, my office is doing research on how peer systems across the university, across the country, develop, manage, and express KPIs and the benchmarking done and associated with them. And as Carolyn noted, another thing that the Hanover Research Group will be doing for us is undertaking that same study, both reviewing what peer systems do in New England and across the country, but then also taking a look at our KPIs in draft form to get a sense of how they square with best practices nationally in the way that this work is done and measured. When we get the KPIs in good working order, we'll share them, of course, with the chancellor, the presidents, the vice chancellors. We'll bring them to this committee, to the board leadership, more than likely share them with the provost and other leadership groups at the campus level as well, just to get as much feedback as possible. The goal, again, is to keep it simple but comprehensive so the trustees can have confidence that we are benchmarking appropriately across the plan, but in a way that doesn't make it too disparate, too diffuse, and too hard to follow in the overall gauging of how we're doing across the plan over time. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have about KPIs.
Yes, Trustee Alexander. Thank you, Jeff.
Are what we were measuring clearly identified at a very top level in the plan itself? What is it that Hanover can do? I mean, we can't change that. There might be interesting aspects as to how we measure those, what the proper metric is. I see Carolyn nodding her head, so maybe that is the issue that needs to be identified in a prudent way. Is that a correct description?
Barbara, you're exactly right. So, I mean, there are any number of ways you can wordsmith a half a dozen KPIs, but it's in how we measure them that the rubber meets the road. So that's exactly what we're looking for from our research partners who have experience in this area. How do you take what are necessarily broadly worded KPIs and pull a way to measure something out of it that's substantive, that you can show back to all of your constituents, your board, your presidents, your university communities, external partners? There's got to be something that's substantial there that we can take back, and that's what we're trying to do.
Trustee Landry.
Yeah, Jeff, is when I look across, I mean, I've tried to look at a number of universities and what they're using for KPIs, and it strikes me that some of it's just is going to be a matter of choice, right? I mean, some of the metric, we want to go from this ranking to this ranking. We want students who are at this number to go to this number. We want retention to go from this number. It's all quantifiable. And it's a matter of choosing the metrics that are most relevant to this particular strategic plan. So that part I understand. Do you see, I think the areas that are more difficult can be some of those more subjective areas. And sometimes things creep into KPIs that are really process or outputs, not outcomes, right? Because it's hard to measure community impact. It's hard to measure cultural issues. So are there areas, the question I have is, have you already identified areas that aren't so, sort of classically and clearly used as metrics in universities, that are a little softer, that you anticipate will be harder to actually determine the outcome of that? And if so, what are they? Or maybe you haven't gotten that far yet.
Well, it's a very good and smart question. So in particular, some of our goals around student sense of belonging, community building among faculty, students, and staff, those things are much more qualitative and will be much more difficult for us to measure in any kind of a probably impossible to measure in any kind of a numerical way. So we are looking at how we can evaluate those things. And we're also looking for examples from peer systems about how they've evaluated goals in their plans that are more qualitative than quantitative, so we can draw examples from what they've done. I do believe in the end, in some cases, there'll be one or two goals or a cluster of goals that we measure by virtue of what's done in that area in a qualitative sense, rather than we got from 5 to 7 or some other metric that could be applied to some other kind of a goal. It's very different than enrollment, retention, graduation rate kinds of goals. So Trustee Landry, you're right on the mark, and we are looking at that right now and recognizing that will be a different measure, but still needs to be an important and valid measure of those kinds of goals in the plan.
So one other question, if I might.
Yeah, go for it.
Is there's a lot of activity in the strategic plan. And so am I assuming correctly that there's going to be a finite number of KPIs that are going to not necessarily relate to every single item in this plan, that part of your process is choosing those KPIs that is really going to be those pieces that the trustees and senior leadership and others really need to be focused on in order to move the entire system from here to here, as opposed to KPIs for every single item? Or are you really trying to have KPIs for every single item in this plan?
No, we couldn't possibly have a KPI match to every single goal for just the reason that you described. We'd have 140 KPIs, and they wouldn't be generalizable across the plan. They wouldn't speak to the overall health or forward motion of the plan. So you're right. I mean, we'll be looking at some core areas within the plan, and also using that division of committee assignments as one rough way of looking at the plan. We have things that are fundamentally finance and administration related, things that are fundamentally research and innovation related, things that are academic and student affairs related, and then the strategic initiatives and human resources work that Carolyn does. That's one way to carve the pie, and we're looking at a couple different ways that we could express just what you said in the KPIs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great exchange. Trustee Alexander. You are muted.
I agree with that back and forth for sure. Just a suggestion, and I'm not proposing this, but a lot of organizations try to measure qualitative kinds of societal and opinion related material with the development of a really good statistically valid survey instrument that is done over a period of time, then gives you a baseline that allows some future analysis of trends and so forth. And the beauty of it is that they are not do you love me surveys, which are totally useless, and many corporations rely on that nonsense, but they could be based on recent transactions in key areas of university life that would allow you to track certain aspects of the qualitative issue at hand. So I just give you that as an example of something that I thought might be interested in. Maybe it's too expensive, I don't know. But there are a variety of ways to do this on a regular basis that you get some pretty interesting changes over time. Thank you.
Can I just say, Trustee
Yeah,
Alexander,
that's great.
that's an
Great feedback.
outstanding example. And in fact, there's precedent for it within our system. So when the University of Maine began its work around the Rising Tide Center, seeking to advance and support women faculty and underrepresented faculty, the launching point and then the points of measure along the road were high quality surveys, just as you described, for what were qualitative shifts in workplace environment, qualitative shifts in climate that were difficult to measure with numbers, but were crucial to track to validate the progression of the work and to respond to the grantor. So we're very much on the page you are in that area of the plan. Thank you.
Great. Other thoughts on KPIs and this piece of it? Okay, great. We've now completed the public portion of the agenda. I just want to make sure, are there any other questions that have popped up about timeline or communications or KPIs before we move into executive session? Yes, Trustee
I
Alexander.
forgot to ask, so when will we see the development of your proposed KPIs?
I would guess no later than the next meeting of this committee, but
Yeah.
probably before then.
Oh, okay,
We're well underway.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's an example of something that will come to this committee for sure, and we'll make sure we discuss it publicly. That's great. So with that, could I have a motion for the Strategic Planning Committee to go into executive session under the provisions of 1 MRSA Section 4056-A to discuss the evaluation of personnel and the consideration of appointments, evaluations, employment, and duties? Kayla, is that the right citation for this one? My script, I think it looks like it was copied from the executive committee. I want to make sure.
It's gonna have to go for now because it's not real estate or legal counsel, so.
All right, Paul, we're doing it. And so may I have a motion related to 1 MRSA Section 4056-A to discuss the evaluation of personnel and the consideration of appointments, evaluations, employment, and duties?
So moved.
Thank you. So I have a second.
Second.
Great. Kayla, can you please take the roll?
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
trustee Alexander,
Yes.
trustee Landry,
Yes.
trustee Moore,
Yes.
and trustee Riley.
Yes.
The motion carries. Bear
Thank
with
you
us,
very
I
much.
knew you were an executive.
There we go. I just want to say thank you to everyone for the hard work and the conversation today. This was a really valuable conversation from both a process and an outcome perspective. And we'll take it all very seriously. We're going to incorporate this, bring it back, and maybe reach out to some of you to make sure we captured it correctly. I just want to say thank you very much for this conversation and for your time this morning, and hope everybody has a great rest of your day. We'll see you very soon.